Welcome to Women Igniting Change, the place to be for women leaders and decision makers who are passionate about changing the world and determined to act. I'm your host, Robbin Jorgensen, former corporate executive, global speaker, and founder and CEO of Women Igniting Change. Let's dive in. Hey, change makers. Welcome back to the Women Igniting Change podcast. I am Robbin Jorgensen, your host. So thrilled that you're back with me today. What I'd love to do today is to give you some tips on how to narrow down your social impact ideas. Because when you are passionate about changing the world in some way, it can be really hard to narrow those ideas down to just one or two. Because there's so many ways that you can make an impact with your talents and your gifts. And it can sometimes be really challenging to know even where do I start. So I want to walk you through 5 specific tips of how to do that. But before we go there, I want to give you some ground rules for this exercise, for this activity that you're about to do. Whether you're doing it live, listening to this episode, or whether you're going to do it at a later date, here are some ground rules that I want you to consider. The first one is I want you to set an intention. What do you want to get out of this activity or this exercise? And it literally could be, I'd love to gain greater clarity around the social impact issues that matter most to me. That's an intention. Because when you set an intention leading into this exercise, it really does help shape and inform the outcome on the other side. So whatever that intention is for you, set that ahead of time before you dive into the exercise. Ground rule number 3 is don't prejudge any category or idea that you come up with based on how hard or easy you think it might be to execute. So just let your ideas flow, just do a major data dump, and don't prejudge anything that comes out of your head. So that's ground rule number 2. Ground rule number 3, don't bring any preconceived assumptions or form any conclusions as to how you think this exercise is going to go, because you might surprise yourself. So no preconceived assumptions or agendas, just let it flow and let yourself be surprised. All right, so idea number 1 is I want you to create a Post-it board. And what I want you to do is grab a group of Post-its. For those of you that know me, you know I love a good Post-it. They can be multicolored. They can be the same color. You do whatever works best for you. Grab some Post-its, grab some markers, grab some pens. And what I want you to do is on one Post-it note, write down a social impact category that matters to you. So on one Post-it, you might write down racial inequality. On another Post-it, you might write down climate change. On another Post-it, you might write down ending domestic-based violence. So each Post-it gets one social impact category. And I literally want you to keep going and going and going until you can't think of any more. So let's hypothetically say you end up with 25 different categories and or topics, one per Post-it. So you're looking at 25 of these. What I want you to do now, or 20 or whatever number you end up with, what I want you to do now is I want you to group them in rows of 5. So for those of you that are not watching this on YouTube and you're listening to this on Apple or Spotify, I want you to imagine that you're putting 5 vertical rows of 5 Post-it notes, okay? So now I want you to work with just that first vertical row of 5. In those 5 categories, I want you to rank them from top to bottom. What is the most important to you? So that top Post-it note is something that is visceral to you. It matters that deeply. That's going to be at the top. That's most important to you. And then I want you to rank them in descending order just for that first vertical row of 5. And then you're going to do the same thing in the subsequent 4 rows or however many you have. And you can put this on a piece of flip chart paper. You can slap these up on the wall. You can put them on your desk, whatever works best for you, whatever your process is. So now you have 5 vertical rows of 5, and they're all in, descending order. The ones at the top matter the most to you, and then descending down to those that are the least. And you're stepping back and you're looking at these 25 social impact categories and topics. Now what I want you to do is I want you to look horizontally at the top 2 rows. So you're looking at the top 2 rows of those vertical rows, and you've got 10 Post-its. I want you to take those 10 Post-its and put them somewhere else. Either put them in a separate part of your desk, on another piece of flip chart paper, on a separate section of your wall. Now you're just dealing with 10. because those were the number 1 and 2 categories that you came up with a few moments ago. So now you're just dealing with 10 social impact topics and categories. And now I want you to do the same thing with those. So you're going to put those 10 into vertical rows of 5. Same activity. The ones that matter the most in each of those vertical rows, you're going to put at the top and then put them in descending order of importance. Now, again, looking horizontally, now you're looking at the top 2 rows again, but now you only have 4, right? You're down to the top 4 social impact categories that matter the most to you. And when you look at those top 4, the number 1 and 2 of those 2 vertical rows of 5, chances are you're meant to do something in one of those 4 categories, something that really speaks to you. And that's really where your social impact lies. Again, whether you're doing this on a full-time basis, a part-time basis, you're collaborating with other people around this topic, it's a passion project, it doesn't matter. But chances are one of those 4, that's an area that you're meant to do something around. And another way that you can leverage these Post-it notes is you can put together little affinity groups. So let's say hypothetically, you have one Post-it that is all around women's economic empowerment. Another Post-it is around ending gender-based violence. Another Post-it is around elevating women's leadership inside organizations. Those are all women focused. So you can cluster those together. That can be one affinity group. You may have another affinity group around animals or another affinity group around the environment. So it's another way to look at the Post-its and then do the same activity within each of those groups and see what rises to the top. So that's idea number 1, is to create a Post-it board. Idea number 2, I love this one. I want you to have an awareness week. So what I want you to do for an entire week is I want you to be hyper observant of what social impact issues jump out at you. So this literally could be a movie that you're watching on Netflix or Prime or Hulu or a documentary. This could be a book that you're reading that you literally can't put down because you're so engrossed in it. It could be something on the news. It could be an article that you read or a magazine article. It could be conversations that you have with friends or family or colleagues. Just be really hyper vigilant and hyper aware of the social impact issues that jump out at you over the course of a week. And what I want you to do is grab a piece of paper or grab a journal and carry it with you for an entire week. And every time one of these issues jumps out that matters to you, just jot it down and keep that log for an entire week. Then at the end of the week, what I want you to do is I want you to look back at what you've written down, and I want you to notice if any patterns emerge. So chances are they're going to. There's going to be a couple of patterns where similar social impact issues and challenges come into your purview because those are the ones that matter most to you, right? So that makes sense. So just notice if there's any patterns. And again, narrow it down. And chances are the social impact issues that come up time and time again over the course of that awareness week, you're meant to do something within that realm. So that's idea number 2, is to do an awareness week. Idea number 3 is to identify your unique type of hunger. So for those of you that know Women Igniting Change, you know that one of the workshops that we deliver, is called The Bigger Game. And it's a tic-tac-toe board of 9 squares. And one of the squares is the hunger square. And this is that deep desire or yearning for something more, something bigger than you. And there's 3 different distinct types of hunger. And chances are your social impact that you want to affect change in falls into one of these categories. So the first one is no, not that. So this type of hunger is around something that must be stopped or discontinued. This is something that you feel viscerally when you see this on the news or you witness it firsthand. This is something that has to be stopped or discontinued. Maybe you see, something around wildfires in California, and you're really passionate about stopping those. No, not that. That can no longer be. And you want to affect change in that area. So that's one type of hunger, is no, not that. The second one is more of that. So this is something that you see around a social impact topic that matters deeply to you, and someone has already put something great out into the world around it. But more of that means it can be enhanced or expanded or elevated. And you may have an idea of how to make that even better. So more of that. So that's hunger type number 2. Hunger type number 3 is something's missing. So you're noticing a gap in the market around this given social impact topic, and something is missing, and you have an idea how to bridge that gap and how to narrow that gap. So that's the third type of hunger, is something's missing. So chances are your social impact desires fall into one of those three hungers. So that's idea number 3, is identifying your given type of hunger. Idea number 4 is I want you to conduct some mini interviews. I want you to ask those closest to you what social impact topics you bring up all the time, something that you can't not talk about. So for those of you that know me, anything around unleashing the contribution of women, my entire body lights up, right? So what do other people observe in you around a social impact category that totally lights you up? And do those mini interviews. And I'll give you an example of some of these that I did for myself. 12 plus years ago, when I created Women Igniting Change back in early 2011, I was struggling with coming up with the exact name of the company. So I did these mini interviews, and I got together with some friends in Atlanta where I lived at the time. And I knew women had to be in the name, of course. But in asking them questions, I didn't realize that I used the word ignite all the time. I had no idea. Because here's the thing, you can't see the picture when you're in the frame, and we are all in our own frame. So that's partially how Women Igniting Change came to be as a name. So conduct those mini interviews, ask people around you that know you and love you, what are the social impact challenges and topics that you talk about all the time because you just simply have to. So that's another way to narrow in what the topic category is that you're meant to affect change around. And then idea number 5, I call this the Warren Buffett question. So I want you to imagine for a moment that Warren Buffett takes you to lunch and he hands you $1 billion check and says, go change the world. You can't spend a dime on yourself. Go change the world. What would you do with that check and how would you spend it? Because chances are the social impact and the social change that you're meant to dive into is somewhere in that answer. Because especially for women, here's what happens. And for those of you that listen to episode number 1, you know that one of my core values is that I believe that every single woman has an idea around social impact and around social change that can revolutionize her community, her industry, her organization, and or the world. But what stops us, one, is money, right? I don't have the money to go out and do this. I don't have the right connections. I don't know how. It's already been done. Who's going to help me? All of those things go in our head. But if Warren Buffett is sitting in front of you and hands you $1 billion check, all of that noise tends to go out of your head because now the world is your oyster. You've got the money. You can find the connections. You can fund it. So what would you do with that check and how would you change the world? So your answer to affecting change is somewhere in there. Again, whether it's part-time, full-time, a side project, it doesn't matter. So here's an important thing that I want to give you as you go through these ideas, because, sometimes they can almost like be your baby. Like you've come up with like 10 that you are really passionate around, and it's really hard to narrow it down to those 1 or 2. What I want you to know is amidst the hundreds of social impact challenges that we as a nation and as a globe face right now, they're all being handled by someone else because that's their number 1 and their number 2. So as you do that first activity of that post-it board and you come down to your top 2 or your top 3 or 4, and that's where you're meant to do your work in the world, trust that all of those other categories that also have to be handled, they've got it. They're someone else's why. They may not be yours, and that's okay. So just trust that all those other issues are being handled by other people where that's their number 1 and that's their number 2. Because your given challenge that you're passionate around, that was given to you for a reason. Whether that's through personal lived experience or just something that you're passionate around, that was given to you to do something with because that is your number 1 and that's your number 2. So those are just a couple of ideas for how to narrow down the categories. And then once you do, creating ideas within that category for social change. And here's what I would love for you to do. We want to know here at Women Igniting Change, what did you come up with? And we want you to share them with us. So I want you to email us at support@womenignitingchange.com and let us know what your top 1 or 2 are. Let us know the answer to that Warren Buffett question. Let us know the ahas you had during Awareness Week, whatever those are, because we're here to support you. Because part of our mission is helping you get those ideas into the light of day and helping you bring them to fruition to literally change the world. So please email us and let us know what you think of this episode, what ideas you came up with, and we will see you back here soon. Take care. Thank you so much for listening to Women Igniting Change. I know creating change matters to you. If you enjoy what we talk about on the show, please take one action today and share it with someone who could benefit from listening. Until next time, keep standing up and speaking out for what matters.